So with us reaching the conclusion of the 5-part story, Our Secret Wars, with it telling us the origin of the new Captain America, well, now it's time for Captain Steve Rogers and Major David Colton to go toe-to-toe. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so going into the conclusion of Our Secret Wars, this picks up just after David Colton's most recent crash out, which was a valid one, because he had to do what he had to do to save that little girl. But back when this happened, going into this, he just learned that the US helped Doom come to power in Latveria. So for David, that feeling of betrayal is very fresh at this time, because this is back when Doom had just become ruler. But after learning this, David now feels like he needs to correct it himself. But before this goes forward, there are a couple of flashbacks that were given, starting with one that shows us the aftermath of David's other crash out from issue 3 when he attacked one of his own men after they took it upon themselves to unalive a small kid. Because really, this is what took the idea of Colton being your front-facing, known to the public Captain America, to being more like a ghost who would handle missions deep in the jungle or under the cover of night. And he was told at the time normally he would have been discharged for what he did, but because Uncle Sam spent a lot of money to make him the next Captain America, they was like, we're gonna get some kind of use out of you. So they made sure to collect all of civilian footage to basically cover up the incident. They put him in therapy and got him cleared by the doctors, and overall they just told him to take some time off. But the offers still remained for him to return and pick up the shield. So during this time off, David went back home to see his mother, who he hasn't seen and hardly spoken to for 5 years at this point. And in his case, in a similar way to what we've seen with Steve Rogers, earlier on in this story when he would often think of Bucky, when deciding if what he's doing is right, and remembering how Bucky would reel him in. For David, when he was able to talk to his mother, she was like that anchor for him, because their talks would help David recenter his thoughts and remember why he's doing what he's doing. But after he stopped hearing back from her, David no longer had that anchor, much like Steve at this time, with him being fresh out of the ice, believing that Bucky's dead and gone. But in David's case, it wasn't so much like his mother supported what he was doing, it was quite the opposite. Because after they lost his older brother when he joined the military, she didn't want the same thing to happen to David. So at this time, she was just happy that he came home. And because of their differences, oftentimes she wouldn't respond to his letters, and he would still write, though the whole time feeling like he was talking to a ghost. So during this conversation, they do quite a bit of catching up, where she tells him after September 11th, he'd left so soon. And at the time she had anger towards David for him leaving, and also towards the US because she felt like the country was looking for revenge. And she tells him here that she's still angry, but it's less like a nerve on fire and more like a dull, constant pain. And David felt the same. And he tells her here, I know you never agreed with me, but I still believe that I was there to do good, to bring democracy. But after, and she stops him right there to tell him like, it's okay, you're home now. And David goes on to tell her, I'm sorry, it's a dull pain for me too, Mom. But I feel like maybe that pain is all I have now. And again, mind you, his mother believes that it's over and that her son came home to live a normal life, so on and so forth, only for her to come home one day and he was gone. And we're shown some of this along with the letter that David wrote, which says, the doctors made me write all this to deal with what I've been going through. But in the end, it isn't for them or for me. It's for you. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't be here. Not really. It hurts too much seeing you look at me, thinking you're seeing your son. Your son is dead. I'm a killer. And I still have to make that mean something. And this is why now when we go back to the situation in Latveria, with David learning about the US helping Doom come to power, this is how he's come to the conclusion that he's going to fix it by killing everyone involved. And that's why he radios Steve saying, it's over, Cap. I'm done. Time to clean out the barracks, then put a bullet in the despot. Give these people the future they deserve. And now at this time, Steve was just trying to see if the remaining hostages were okay, only for David to respond like this and tell him, see you on the other side, soldier. So now this places Steve Rogers on de-escalation duty like crazy, because in this moment, just after Steve defeated Doom, this caused Doom to briefly retreat, though Doom would continue from here to be the ruler of Latveria for some time, as we know. But even with Doom running to lick his wounds, many of the Latverian soldiers were taking his orders to heart. And I mean to the point where one of them was about to smoke this old lady. But Steve stepped in and he told them to take this moment of peace and go home. And after that, he heads over to Marius Wolf, who, mind you, was supposed to be publicly executed by Doom on this day, but thanks to Steve, the man's still breathing. But Steve heads over to him to ask where the troops' barracks, because he's got to get over there and stop Major David Colton, who's heading that way to kill everybody in sight. So for a moment, Marius Wolf is like, why stop him? And he's like, you saw how those soldiers were getting ready to boom that old lady? These people are traitors to their country. And again, for Marius, he gets a benefit in any leverage that Doom would lose, because back when this story takes place, Marius Wolf wanted to replace Doom as Latveria's new leader. And as leader of the Latverian resistance with that goal in mind, even still, Wolf really is disgusted. with how many of these soldiers had just fell in line with doom. But Steve pulls him to the side and he basically tells him, I get that. But look at these men. They're conflicted. And today is giving you greater ammunition than bullets. But if an American brutally murders Latvian soldiers, unprovoked, how do you think this is going to go? Use today to build support, not death. So Wolf tells Rogers that he can't help him. Not physically, like he's not going to go out there and help save the soldiers. But he can show Steve the way. But soon after, news travels amongst the soldiers about Captain America attacking the barracks. And when one of these guys tells the other, he's like, good, he's just one man. Surely we'll take him down and Doom will be pleased, only to get shot in the head right in the middle of his sentence. But it wasn't Colton who did this. It was Slate. The Marine David Colton mollywopped in order to save that little girl in issue 4. And now she wants to know where the barracks are, so she can kill Colton herself. So now it's like we got this 3-way race to the barracks between David Colton, Steve Rogers, and Julie Slate, where all 3 of them are looking to walk out of here with a different solution. And 2 of these solutions involve some people not walking out of here at all. But as Steve makes his way to the barracks to stop Colton, not too far away he finds Ainsley, the young girl who David had saved. And when he gets there, he's like, shh, be quiet, it's okay, I'm here to help. And she's just like, yeah, that's what he said. But right away when Cap hears her talk, he recognizes her accent, which is how he knows she's American. So he tells her to stay here and he calls for an evac, even though they're nowhere near the evac site and still getting interference from the signal jammers. But Steve radios this out to General Ross because Steve doesn't know the truth yet, and he doesn't have a lot of time to get to Colton. But when Steve enters the barracks, he sees this glow from around the corner, and he hears a voice saying, it's necessary, Cap. I wish it wasn't, but it is. We keep losing sight of what we're supposed to be about. Freedom. And man, when Cap looks up, he sees David Colton, covered in blood, with bodies laid out as far as you can see. The Latverian barracks burning to the ground. And it's like, man, this dude really took on the whole lobby. Because for Major Colton, he'd come to the point where now he just believes this is who he is, a killer. And if killing is what he has to do to bring the people of this country freedom, then he's going to run that kill streak off the charts. And he tells Steve here, we keep losing sight of what we're supposed to be about, freedom. And Steve tells him, David, this isn't the way. And David's like, isn't it? We're here. These soldiers are denying their people freedom. They use violence and the threat of it to keep them down. They made their choice. So Steve tells him here, we're not at war. This is a rescue mission. Some of these men you just murdered were scared, lost people who wanted to defend their country, who signed up for a thing that became something else. We're in a sovereign nation. We can't make this call, Colton. Not in cold blood. Please, let's just go get you some help. And that's where David tells him, I can't. There's so much blood on my hands, Cap. Cold and warm. That blood has to mean something. Has to be for something. And it's right here where David notices that he missed a spot. As he goes on to say, and if that means I have to freaking bathe in it until freedom takes hold here, then that's what I'll do. As he goes for the murder shield throw, only for Steve to throw his shield for the last second save. And from there, the 2 of these guys go at it. Because from the start of the series and really all throughout this 5-part story, we've been given this comparison between Steve and David, where the 2 of them had a very similar beginning that later led to them being 2 very different people. And now it's like we're seeing the belief systems that both of them had formed individually, physically go toe to toe. And as this happens, we go back to the beginning of David's letter, where he says here, Mom, I'm sorry. I don't think you were right, but I wasn't either. The world has gone mad, but I don't know what the cure is. All I know is that it turned me into a killer, with the idea that if I murdered the right people, or enough of them, then others would have the kind of freedom you and I have. And after getting the upper hand, Steve tells him here that the soldiers and evac team are on their way, so they're going home. But then that's where Slate shows up, ready to shoot Steve in the back. And she's just like, I'm sick of you freaking Captain Americas, just before she squeezes the trigger. Only for David to hop up, grab the shield, and save Steve. And poor Slate catches another dose of Captain America when David takes her down with the shield. And now David's just like, oh, never could get that shield to come back. Ooh. But in David's case, the serum that was created to give him the same abilities as Captain America, it wasn't an exact one-to-one match. So there's times where he suffers from the drawbacks. And this is one of those times. And when he collapses here with heart failure, struggling to breathe, he asks Steve, like, man, you wouldn't happen to know CPR, would you? Only for Steve to tell him, I'm sorry. I don't know what that is. Because Steve went down in the ice in the mid-40s, and CPR didn't come around to the 60s. And given the time where this story takes place, Steve really hadn't been back for that long. So there's still quite a bit he needs to catch up on. But right now, as David's still losing consciousness, he says here, partnered with a man at a time. We did this, Cap. America backed Doom. So it's right here where he lets Steve know the truth that he was told. And before he blacks out, he tells Steve, if I don't make it, I need you to tell her losing me was worth it. Which for David, this refers back to his mom, who was always afraid of losing him, like they lost his older brother, which is why she stopped talking to him again when David returned to the military in '06. And now for Steve Rogers, when he learns the truth here, he doesn't even go back with the troops. In fact, he doesn't even go back to speak with General Ross until a month later. And when he returns, the army, of course, has him in cuffs. But General Ross believes that Steve's come back to atone for his disappearance. Because when Colton came back, Ross was told that Rogers had just walked off into the woods. And Steve's like, yeah, that's what I did. So the general asked him, like, where the hell did you go? And that's where Steve tells him that he took some time to clear his head and see the world that he ended up in. And he tells Ross that he went to talk to people to find out if America's still a place worth fighting for. And he says here a lot of people said no. They had their reasons, good reasons from the sound of it. And how in the time where he came from, his reasons were similar. And he goes on to tell General Ross, America was far from perfect, and that hasn't changed. I don't think it ever will, because that's what our country is about, what a dream is about, striving. I signed up during wartime. That war is long gone, but there are still fights worth having. The people of this country and this world are worth fighting for. And that's where Steve gets in his face, and he's like, you overthrew a government in Latveria. And General Ross is like, yeah, a corrupt one. And Steve tells him, but that wasn't your reason, was it? Doom offered you technology, resources, and that's where the general's like, tread carefully, Rogers, only for Steve to request a discharge, because he's done. No more blindly taking orders. And if Ross happens to need him for a mission, Steve's going to choose what mission he's going to take. And he tells General Ross if he hides anything from him again, that he better pray that Steve don't come for him next. And you already know Ross don't like that type of talk. So he denies Steve's discharge, because he still considers him military property. But then someone else approaches to talk about their retirement as well. And that someone else is Tony Stark, who again at this point in time was still acting like him and Iron Man were two different people. But he just makes his way into this conversation like, oh, is that Captain America? But we find out here in the next room, David Colton's undergoing surgery to get Tony Stark's heart-saving technology installed in his chest. And he just strolls in like no applause necessary, happy to make up for the malfeasance of whatever untested drug they pumped into that soldier years ago. Then he's like, oh, I couldn't help overhear you denying Captain Rogers his well-deserved retirement, Ross. And that's where Tony gives the general an ultimatum. Because he's basically like, while we're on the topic of retirement, Tony goes on like he was thinking of retiring himself, which would mean no more sweet Stark tech weapons going to the military. So he asked the general who would he like to retire the least. And the general gives Tony this look like, well, I like my weapons. But effectively, this is Tony getting Steve off the hook, scot-free. So as the two of them leave, Tony's like, Steve, is it okay if I call you Steve? And Steve's like, yeah. Then Tony's like, you want to grab a drink with me, Steve? Celebrate life as private citizens? And that's where Steve's like, do they still have beer these days? And Tony tells him, do they ever? Because Tony loves his alcohols. And later on, when Steve makes his way to Avengers Mansion, he's now greeted by Iron Man, who makes sure to let Steve know that Tony Stark tasked the best Avenger to show him around. And now, like we saw back in issue 1, since Steve Rogers had come back, Iron Man had been trying to get him to join the Avengers. But at the time when Steve was fresh out of the ice, he told Iron Man that he's a soldier and he's got to go back to base. But now that Steve's saying things like, I'm no longer a soldier, this has Iron Man asking what made him decide to finally join. And Steve tells him that Tony put their mission in terms he could understand. He was clear and to the point. Avengers help people. So Steve's like, if he's going to figure out this world, then helping people's the best way to do it. Simple as that. And before Iron Man leaves, he tells Steve, oh, hey, there's a package for you on the desk there. I'll let you settle in. Dinner's at 5 because Thor's going to a concert, if you can believe it. And when Steve opens this package, the first thing he sees is a letter written by Reed Richards that says the world never forgets heroes. I'm glad you're here. And when Steve looks inside the box, he finds a Bucky Barnes action figure, which is a callback to the latter part of a conversation between Steve and Reed, back when Steve went to Reed to learn more about Victor Von Doom, before heading to Latveria with David Colton. Because in that conversation, Reed told Steve that his dad basically worshipped Captain America as he was growing up, just before he pulled out this Captain America action figure that Reed had since he was 8 years old. But towards the end of this talk, Reed was really just trying to let Steve know how much he means to people, with Captain America being the kind of guy who fights evil wherever it lives. But it came to a point where Steve was like, man, did they make one of these for Bucky too? And Reed told him, yeah, but it wasn't until this moment when Steve finally got to see it. And Steve looks at it and he says here that he's going to keep fighting so that it all means something, which is similar to what David Colton said at one point. But it just goes to show us again how Steve and David had their experiences and turned out to be very different. So yeah, following this story, we're going to be picking up more of the present day events that came after, like Dungeons of Doom and a lot of the Avengers Armageddon tie-ins as well. But with that said, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. All right, later.